Who asks strangers to be their father? What kind of boys shake while saying it? And what kind of man says yes without a plan? The question hit Rex Calder like a punch to the ribs as his bike idled under the buzzing gas station light, and the two boys stood there in torn shirts and dusty shoes, staring up at him like he was the last safe thing left in the world. And Rex was not a soft man, and not a clean man, and not a man who believed he could save anyone because he had seen too much and buried too many friends. Yet the smaller boy stepped closer and whispered, "Can you be our dad?" And the words cracked something deep inside his chest that years of fights and prison nights and empty highways had failed to break. And Rex felt his club watching him from their bikes behind him, big men in leather with road names and scars. Men who feared nothing, yet all of them went still because kids do that to hard men. They remind them of the people they used to be before the world taught them teeth. And Rex crouched slow, so he did not scare them, and he saw bruises on their arms and dirt on their necks and fear in there. "Eisen," he asked, "to hurt you?" And the older boy said they did and pointed toward the dark road beyond the pumps. And that was enough for Rex because he knew that tone. He knew that kind of fear. He had worn it once as a kid himself, and behind him his brothers shifted. Boone the enforcer cracked his knuckles. Slate the strategist narrowed his eyes. Doc Morrow the medic leaned forward to study the bruises. And Finch the lookout scanned the road like a hawk, because this was how their life worked. Danger first, question second. And Rex stood and said soft but firm, "You boys hungry?" And they nodded fast like they had not eaten in days. And that was when headlights flashed to the far end of the road, and the boys froze like rabbits hearing wolves, and Rex saw it, and his voice dropped low and calm, and he said to his club, "We got company." Engines cut at once, silence spread, wind moved trash across the concrete. The headlights grew bigger. The boys grabbed Rex's vest tight, and the older one whispered, "They found us, they found us." And Rex felt heat rise in his chest. Not fear, never fear, just anger, the slow kind that burns steady. And he rested one hand on the kid's shoulder and said, "Nobody's touching you tonight. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from." The truck rolled closer. Old black pickup, engine rattling, 3 men inside, shapes thick and wrong. Rex watched their hands, not their faces, because hands tell truth. Boone stepped off his bike, slow, ready. Slate moved left to block the road. Finch melted in his shadow near the ice machine. Doc stayed with the boys, gentle voice asking their names. Eli and Noah, they said brothers, no parents, no home, and Rex's jaw tightened because he already knew what kind of men hunted kids at night, and none of them were worth mercy. The truck stopped 10 feet away, engine running. Driver leaned out and smiled a thin smile and said, "Those kids belong to us." And Rex said, "Kids ain't property." And the smile faded. And the man said, "You don't want this trouble biker." And Rex answered, "I never do, but find me anyway." And the passenger door opened and a boot hit the ground and the boys flinched hard. And that told Rex everything. He stepped forward one pace and his voice turned to iron, and he said, "Last chance, leave." The man laughed, not loud, just mean, and said, "You got no idea who you're talking to." And Rex thought maybe that was true, but he knew exactly what he was looking at, predators who thought night made them kings. And behind Rex, the low rumble of engines started again, one by one like thunder waking up. Boone's bike growled. Then Slate's, then Finch's, a warning sound, a promise sound, and the men by the truck looked past Rex and saw the line of riders, and their smiles slipped a little because even bad men know math, and the numbers were not on their side. But then the driver spoke again, and his voice turned smug, and he said, "You think you're little. Club scares me. I got law on my side." And from the far road, another set of lights flashed red and blue, slow, patient, coming closer, and Rex felt the boys tense again, and he understood why before they even spoke, because Eli whispered, "That's him, that's the bad cop." And something cold slid through Rex's veins because dirty cops were worse than criminals, They wore trust like a mask, and Boone muttered that complicates things, and Slate said maybe not. And Rex watched the patrol car roll nearer. And he knew this night had just turned into something bigger than a roadside rescue, because if a cop was tied to the men hunting these kids, then this was a chain, not a link, and Rex Calder hated chains. The cruiser stopped, door opened, boots hit pavement, the officer stepped out tall, and calm hand resting near his belt, and his badge caught the gaslight glare. He looked at Rex, then at the boys, then at the truck, and he smiled like he owned the scene and said, "Evening, gentlemen, looks like we got a situation." And Rex thought, yeah, we do. We got a test. We got a line in the sand, and we got two small boys waiting to see what kind of man I really am. The red and blue lights washed over the gas station. The bad cop stood still. His name tag read Dorsey. Rex did not like his eyes. They were calm but cold. Eli held Rex's vest tighter. Noah hid behind document. No one spoke for a moment. The night felt heavy. Boone shifted his weight. He was ready to strike. Slate watched every angle. Finch kept his gaze on the truck. Doc checked the boys' bruises again. Rex stepped forward. He kept his voice slow. He said, "These kids are under my care now." Dorsey smiled a thin smile. He said, "That is not how law works." Rex said, "Law should protect kids, not hunt them." The men by the truck watched quietly. They were not nervous. That bothered Rex. Bad men who are calm are the worst kind. Dorsey walked closer. His boots scraped the ground. He said, "Those boys are runaways." He said they belong in custody. Eli shook his head fast. "No whispered no." Rex noticed. He noticed everything. He said, "They stay with me tonight." Dorsey's smile faded. He said, "You bikers think you own roads." Boone stepped closer. Slate lifted a hand a little. That was their signal to hold. Boone stopped. Rex did not look back. He trusted his brothers. That was their rule. Trust first. Talk later. Dorsey looked at the truckmen. Just a glance. But Rex saw it. That glance said enough. They knew each other. Slate saw it too. Finch saw it. Boone cracked his neck slowly. Doc's eyes hardened. Rex spoke again. He said, "These men with the truck. You know them." Dorsey shrugged. He said, "I know lots of people." Rex nodded once. He said, "Yeah, I bet you do." The wind blew dust across the ground. A loose sign creaked above them. The moment stretched thin. Then Noah whispered, "They hurt us if we don't bring money." Rex felt heat in his chest again. He kept his face calm. He asked what money. Eli Svalovith. He said, "They make kids steal. From stores. From cars. From people." He said, "If we fail, they beat us." Silence fell. Even the truck engine sounded loud now. Boone muttered animals. Slate said, "We need proof." Always thinking. Always planning. That was why Rex trusted him. Dorsey laughed once. He said, "Nice story." He reached for his radio. Boone tensed. Rex lifted one finger. Boone froze again. Rex said, "You sure you want that radio call recorded?" Dorsey paused. Just 1 second. But it was enough. Rex saw it. Fear. Small but real. Rex stepped closer. He spoke low. He said, "You walk away. We walk away." Dorsey stared at him. The truck men shifted. One spat on the ground. Another cracked his knuckles. The driver watched like a snake. Then Dorsey said, "This is not over." Rex said, "I know." Dorsey stepped back. He got in his cruiser. The lights stayed on. The engine started. He drove off slow. Too slow. Watching in his mirror. The truck stayed. That meant trouble. Slate leaned toward Rex. He whispered, "They will follow." Rex said, "Good. Let them." He turned to the truck. He said, "You boys done staring." The driver smirked. He said, "You just signed your death note." Rex smiled faint. He said, "Get in line." The passenger cursed. The truck roared and sped off. Tires screeched. Dust rose. Silence returned. But it was not calm silence. It was storm silence. Rex looked at his club. He nodded once. That meant meeting. Boone kicked his stand up. Slate already thinking. Finch scanning roads. Doc guiding the boys gently. They rode out together. Engines loud. Lights cutting the dark highway. Eli held Rex tight from behind. Noah rode with document. The road stretched long and empty. Wind rushed past them. Rex felt the old feeling again. The war feeling. He had hoped he left it behind. But trouble always finds men like him. They reached the clubhouse after miles of black road. It was an old brick building. No sign outside. Just steel doors. Finch opened them. Bikes rolled in. Doors shut. Locks clicked. Safe for now. Inside smelled of oil and wood and smoke. The boys looked around wide-eyed. Boone brought water. Doc cleaned their cuts. Slate spread a map on the table. Rex stood at the head. He listened first. That was his way. Boone said we hit them first. And it fast. Slate said no. Too messy. Finch said they got backup. I saw another truck on the ridge road. Doc said kids need rest. They are shaking. Rex nodded. All good points. He finally spoke. He said we do it smart. We learn who they are. Who runs them. Who protects them. Slate tapped the map. He said I can track plates. Finch said I will watch roads. Boone said I will handle muscle. Doc said I stay with kids. Rex looked at each of them. Pride sat quiet in his chest. This was his family. Not by blood. By choice. Ele took Rex's sleeve. He asked are they coming back. Rex knelt. He said maybe. Eli asked are you scared. Rex paused. Then he said yes. But fear makes us sharp. Noah asked will you leave us. Rex shook his head. He said I gave my word. The boys nodded. They believed him. That mattered. Slate's phone buzzed. He checked it. His face went still. Rex noticed. He asked what. Slate turned the screen. It showed a photo. Grainy. Dark. But clear enough. It was the boys. Tied to chairs. A date stamp from last week. Boone swore under his breath. Doc looked sick. Finch whispered how did they get that? Slate said police database leak. Rex's eyes hardened. Dorsey. Had to be. Rex felt the storm inside him grow. He spoke slow. He said this is bigger than street thugs. This is a network. Boone grinned dark. He said good. I hate small fights. Rex did not smile. He looked at the boys. Then at his brothers. He said we shut it down. All of it. Slate nodded. Finch nodded. Boone cracked his knuckles again. Doc closed his kit. Outside, thunder rumbled far away. A storm was coming. And every man in that room knew the same thing without saying it. War was now unavoidable. Morning came gray and slow, and the clubhouse felt different than it had the night before because now everyone knew they were not dealing with random street trash, but with something organized and rotten, something that reached into places it should not reach. And Rex stood by the window with a mug of black coffee that had gone cold while he watched the empty road outside and thought about the photo on Slate's phone and the fear in Eli's voice and the calm smile on Dorsey's face. And he hated calm smiles more than threats because calm meant planning, and planning meant patience, and patient enemies were the ones who buried you. Boone leaned on the wall, cleaning his knuckles with a rag, even though they were not dirty. Just something to do with his hands. And he said, I say we grab one of those truck punks and squeeze him till he sings. And Slate shook his head and said, that is what they expect us to do, which means they are ready for it, which means we walk into a trap. Finch sat on the table edge, spinning a small flashlight in his fingers, and said, I saw that ridge truck again at dawn. Same one, same plate. They are watching us. Doc's voice came from the couch where Noah slept under a blanket, and he said, then we do nothing loud yet. Kids come first. Rex nodded slightly because Doc was right, and Doc was always right when it came to keeping people breathing. Eli sat nearby awake, but quiet, listening like a small soldier in a war too big for him. And Rex crouched in front of him and asked, you remember where they took you before? Eli hesitated but then nodded and said an old place with broken windows and a blue door and a train sound close by. Slate's eyes lit a little, and he said Rail Yard District has 3 buildings like that. Maybe 4. Boone pushed off the wall and said, "Good, we check all 4. Rex stood and finally drank the cold coffee without caring about the taste and said, "No, we check smart, not fast. Because the second they feel pressure, they move the whole operation and then we lose them." And that was when the clubhouse phone rang. Not a cell, the old wall phone that almost nobody used, and every man in the room looked at it like it was a snake. It rang again, sharp and loud. Finch muttered, "That ain't good." Rex walked over and picked it up and said, "Yeah." Silence answered first. Then a voice smooth as oil said, "You took something that belongs to us." Rex recognized it at once, even though he had never heard it before, because it was the kind of voice that enjoyed pain, the kind that smiled while others begged. Rex said, "I don't keep stolen property." The voice chuckled softly and said, "Brave, stupid, or both. That is what I am deciding." Boone stepped closer, trying to hear. Slate watched Rex's face for clues. The voice continued, "You met my driver last night. You embarrassed him. I don't like when my people feel small." Rex said, "Sounds like a personal problem." The voice ignored that and said, "You return the boys, and this ends. You keep them, and this becomes something you cannot win." Rex's tone stayed flat, and he said, "You hurt kids for money. That means it already became something I can't ignore." A pause followed, longer this time. Then the voice said, "Last chance biker." Rex replied, "Come take them." And he hung up before the man could answer. Silence filled the room again, but it was thicker now, heavier. Boone grinned wide and said, "Now, that is a proper invitation." Slate did not smile. He said that was the boss, not a grunt, which means we are on his map now. Finch stopped spinning the flashlight and said, "Cars outside, 2, maybe 3. Rex moved to the window, slow and careful, and saw them. Dark sedans rolling past, too slow for normal traffic. He counted faces, shapes, angles, then stepped back and said, "Positions." The room changed in a second. Boone at the door, Finch to the back hall, Slate killing lights, Doc lifting Noah gently and guiding Eli behind the bar counter. Rex stayed in the center calm and still like the eye of a storm. Tires crunched gravel outside. Doors slammed. Footsteps approached. Then a voice shouted from outside real loud, and official police open up. Boone looked at Rex with a question in his eyes. Rex answered with one small nod. Boone opened the door. 3 uniformed cops stood there, and behind them stood Dorsey with that same thin smile. He stepped forward slow and said, "Morning, gentlemen. We received a report of kidnapped minors." Doc whispered liar under his breath. Slate's jaw tightened. Rex said, "You got a warrant." Dorsey tilted his head and said, "You got something to hide." Rex held his gaze and said, "Always, but not what you're looking for." Tension stretched tight as wire. One of the uniformed cops shifted uneasy like he did not know whose side he was on. And then something changed because Eli's small voice came from behind the counter saying, "That's him. That's the man who gave them to the bad guys." The words hung in the air like a gunshot echo. The young cop blinked in shock and looked at Dorsey. Dorsey's smile vanished for half a second, and in that half-second Rex saw the truth clear as daylight. And Dorsey moved fast, reaching for his radio, but Boone was faster and grabbed his wrist hard and said, "Careful." The other cops stepped back, confused hands hovering near belts. Slate spoke sharp and calm, "Nobody draw unless you want this messy." Rex stepped closer to Dorsey and said real quiet, "You picked the wrong kids." Dorsey's eyes turned flat and hateful, and he whispered, "You have no idea what you stepped into." Rex answered, "Maybe, but I know how it ends." Sirens sounded far away suddenly. Real ones this time. More than one car. Finch called from the hall, "That ain't ours," which meant only one thing. The boss was making his move while the cops were here. Chaos is cover. Rex looked at his brothers and saw the same decision already made in their faces. The collision had started and there was no stopping it now. The first siren grew louder, and then another joined it, and then 3 more. And the sound rolled over the clubhouse like a storm breaking open. And for a split second, everyone stood still because too many sirens can mean help or death, depending on who called them. And Rex watched Dorsey's face instead of the door, because truth always shows there first. And what he saw was not confidence anymore, but urgency, tight and sharp. And that told him everything he needed to know, because dirty men only rush when their plan is slipping. And Dorsey jerked his arm, trying to pull free from Boone's grip, and snapped, "Let go of me, or you're finished." And Boone smiled slow and said, "Been finished before." Didn't stick. The younger uniformed cop looked between them, confused and nervous, and said, "Sir, what is going on?" And that was when Slate stepped forward, calm as glass, and held up the phone with the photo of Eli and Noah tied to chairs, and said, "What's going on is your boss forgot evidence travels." The young cop's face changed fast from doubt to shock, and he looked straight at Dorsey and said, "Tell me that's fake." Dorsey did not answer. His jaw flexed and his eyes darted once toward the door, and that tiny glance was enough for Rex, because it meant timing. It meant someone outside was about to do something loud. And Rex moved quick and grabbed Dorsey's radio and tossed it to Finch and said, "Kill it." Finch smashed it under his boot just as tires screamed outside and engines roared in gunshots. Cracked in the distance, not close, but close enough, the crooked boss had sent his men to erase the problem while police were present. Chaos inside chaos. And the honest cop cursed under his breath and ran to the door and looked out and shouted shots fired down the block. And Rex said to him, "You on the truth, you stand with us right now." The cop hesitated only a second, then nodded once hard and drew his weapon and said, "Tell me where." Rex pointed toward the rail yard side streets and said, "That's where they hide." Slate grabbed the map from the table and shoved it into the cop's hands and marked the spot with a pen in one fast motion and said, "Blue door building near the tracks." Boone released Dorsey with a shove into a chair and tied his wrist with a zip tie from the tool rack, while Dorsey snarled threats that nobody listened to. Doc pulled the boys close and said, "You stay behind me no matter what." And Eli nodded, but his eyes were on Rex, not scared now, just trusting. And that trust hit Rex harder than any punch, because it meant he could not fail. Not tonight, not ever for them. Outside, the siren stopped and doors slammed and more voices shouted orders. Real officers this time, not puppets. And Rex turned to his crew and said, "This ends now." Boone cracked his knuckles. Slate checked his watch. Finch opened the back exit. Doc kept one arm around each boy. And together, they moved out into the gray morning, where smoke drifted faint in the distance, and somewhere metal clanged against metal from the rail yard. They rode hard in fast engines thundering through narrow streets until the old rail buildings rose ahead, broken windows staring like empty eyes. And Rex spotted it at once, the blue door, half rusted, half peeled paint. A black SUV parked beside it. Two men outside with rifles who turned too late when the bikes roared in. Boone hit the first man like a truck, and the rifle clattered away. Finch swept the second man's legs and pinned him. Slate kicked the door open. Rex went in first. Inside smelled of mold and oil and fear. Footsteps pounded above. A shout echoed. Rex climbed the stairs two at a time and burst into the upper room, where the boss stood near a desk with a pistol in hand and a grin that tried to look fearless. He was older than Rex expected, gray at the temples, suit jacket neat like he was in a dinner and not a crime scene. And he said, "You should have walked away, biker." Rex answered, "You should have left kids alone." The man lifted the gun, but stopped when he saw Boone behind Rex and Finch in the doorway, and Slate to the side, and the honest cop rushing up the stairs with weapon drawn. The boss's grin cracked just a little, and he said, "You think this ends me?" Rex said, "No, this ends your work." The boss's eyes shifted, calculating exits that were not there. And then he did something desperate and grabbed a small remote from the desk and pressed it. A loud click sounded somewhere below. Doc's voice shouted from outside, "Bomb." In time. Snapped tight. Rex moved without thinking and tackled the boss away from the desk, as Boone grabbed the device and hurled it through the broken window, and everyone hit the floor and a blast boomed outside loud and hot, but short because distance stole its teeth. Glass rained down, dust filled the air, ears rang, but they were alive, and Boone coughed and said rude. The honest cop cuffed the boss while he was still dazed and read him his rights with a voice that shook but did not stop sirens. Closing again, now right on top of them, real backup, real witnesses, no more shadows to hide in, and as officers swarmed the building and hauled the criminals out one by one, Rex stepped back into the street where Doc stood with Eli and Noah wrapped in his arms, and both boys were staring at him like he had just pulled the sun out of the sky. Eli ran first and hugged Rex tight, and Noah followed, and Rex felt their small arms lock around him, and he closed his eyes a second because he had not been hugged like that since he was a kid, and he did not know how much he needed it until it happened. The honest cop walked over and said, "My name's Carter, and I owe you." Rex shook his hand and said, "Just do it right from here on." Carter nodded and said, "I will." Across the street, Dorsey was dragged from a cruiser in cuffs, shouting threats that nobody cared about anymore. The storm was over, the chain was broken, and Boone lit a cigarette and said, "So, boss, we good?" Rex looked down at the boys still, holding his vest, and then at his brothers standing around him, bruised, tired, loyal, and alive. And he said, "You were good." The sun finally pushed through the clouds and lit the road gold. And for the first time a long while, Rex Calder felt something simple and rare settle in his chest. Not rage, not guilt, not ghosts, just peace. And as the bikes lined up and the boys climbed on ready to ride with them toward whatever came next, Rex thought maybe this was not the end of the road after all. Maybe it was the start of a better one.